Network. I am Kurt Roska, pleased to be a co-host here. Today we're going to have a show of all of us on the team, the Onward and Upward team, and all of us joined together with our podcasting with the World of Ability Podcast Network. That Anchor show is produced every Saturday, a separate World of Ability podcast. So again, we're here at the Compassionate Citizens Podcast, which is all about keyword compassion. And so this is about exploring how far compassion goes in our lives. Again, the inspiration of this is credited to Norland Dimmitt out of Chicagoland area in Illinois. He taught us about the Compassionate Citizens Project, which is inspired from the faith community reacting to our nation's politics here in the US. And here at the World of Ability Podcast Network, it's a global conversation. So we take a look at how things work in nations and the power of one, the power of each person, each citizen of the nation to participate in shaping the nation's future. And at Compassionate Citizens Podcasts, we are suggesting that putting a lot of compassion in what we do in our political activities as citizens is great. And then we bloom and blossom it out into all aspects of life, whether it's our volunteer aspirations and pursuits, our lifelong learning, and our business, professional, and job work, and all the fun things we do, hobbies, pastime, leisure activities, sports, and rec, and therapeutic activities and recreation. So when I mention sports, we can think of sportsmanship, sportsman-like conduct, and to be good sports, as they say. So I say that particularly this week because I was at a playoff game for my alma mater, the team, the varsity team, I think was like 9-2, including with the 2 losses. They lost their first game of the year and then their last game of the year, the last game being against Muskego High School out of Wisconsin. And I was surprised by the winning team. Muskego High School was winning handily. And we had a few penalties of unsportsmanlike conduct by the winning team, which I thought was really unusual, that a team's enjoying a win and that we have students, varsity players, succumbing to unsportsmanlike conduct. So there definitely is something out there in negativity and, kind of veering away from, sought after character and, conducting oneself as a leader. And so today we're going to be able to explore that a little bit in terms of what it is in our lives that fuels our compassion and what we do ourselves personally to maintain that compassion in our own behavior, and what we do to make sure we're reaching for that admirable characteristic as we are doing what we do each and every day. So speaking of doing what we do, we like what Emily does each and every day. So Emily, you want to come in here as our podcast engineer and co-host here and lead the way for Jennifer to continue her debuts with us as part of our co-host team. Emily, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily with Onward and Upward and Prosperity Pathways, both founded by Anna Maria Bliven, who is a veteran. Both of them focus on helping people find employment, and with Onward and Upward, catering to veterans and the homeless population with finding employment. But I am here today with Jennifer Whitaker and a fellow coworker of Onward and Upward, Tim Trojan. So how is everybody today?
I know I'm good.
Tim?
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, enjoying the day. trying to fit in everything I can, not do anything too rushed and, not rushing. So, but still want to get a couple of things. It's the first time I've done this show. And yeah,
Well, welcome.
thank you. Same to you. Glad to have you here. Glad to be with you.
Tim, just to let you know, Miss Jennifer is going to be one of our co-hosts occasionally on a couple of the podcasts.
Predominantly, I'm going to be mostly on the Wednesday one, which I think that's compassionate. No, that's not compassionate citizen. Which one is that? That's
Wednesdays are Prosperity Pathways.
Prosperity Pathway. That's where you'll usually find me, Tim. I'm doing every other week on. Today is gonna be obviously today Tuesday, but after that I'm gonna be on every other Prosperity Pathway for the remainder of 2021.
I think we lost Tim. I don't know if
We
we're gonna
did.
get him to come
I'm
back.
just talking to myself.
But
I just-
any reaction to what Kurt was saying before he took off for a short time?
Yes, as far as like starting a discussion, I know how Kurt was talking about Prosperity Pathway and us trying today to ignite everybody, or no, wait, today is Compassionate Citizen, to ignite everybody to show their compassion through various channels, as I call it, in life. And he asked about how do we find our compassion? Personally, as a Christian, I find it within my faith. That by being dedicated to my faith, I am being dedicated to spreading the love of Christ. Whatever other people's religions may be, often different religions associate love being the right thing. So even if somebody's a different religion, I encourage, if they maybe don't have a good support system, social world, like friends, family, whoever, some kind of circle of people to show them love and compassion, find it within yourself through faith, whatever is your faith. And then, especially if you don't have it present in your life from other people, more reason to show it to those who you may have an effect on, because you've learned the hard way what life is like without it. So why not try to supply more love, faith, and compassion to the world? Because I think compassion is a certain method of love, and that's where I'm going with that. So we can express it in different channels, even though personally I find that's where I get my compassion. We can let out in our hobbies, in our work, in career, even if it's not necessarily the current job, but somewhere we're trying to go on the side that's right now a side job that we're trying to make into our real job, predominant job, or breadwinning. Or it can be in our hobbies, like because maybe, like I personally like to make beaded necklaces or other beaded jewelry. So compassion could be, well, if I have too many, I could give it away to somebody who's needy, or to somebody who, whether their neediness is financial and or homelessness, or their neediness is that they just need an uplift because maybe they're depressed or whatever. But that's an option. I could give it away, and that could be a form of showing compassion. Even though you didn't make it for them, you still did something for them by giving them that whatever item for free. So we could even show it in our hobbies in ways like that aren't necessarily our livelihood.
Right. Now we have Tim back.
We do have Tim back, but he's being very
Tim,
quiet.
Tim, do you have any thoughts of what Jennifer was just talking about?
I just really like Jennifer.
Right.
So.
Emily, is this just me or are we not hearing Tim?
No, Tim, you're cutting in and out of bit here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Briefly, you're
Hello?
coming and
Hold
going.
on. Oh, are you from the South? You have an accent.
Well, are you talking to me or are you talking to Emily? That's the question first.
I'm talking to you.
I've lived
I-
in 6 states all over the South. In my years, my childhood, before age, or should I say by age 18, I had lived in 6 states in the South. I went to college in
boy.
Virginia. I went to high school in 3 different states, Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina. Technically 4 different high schools in 3 different states. And I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. And at some point in high school, when I was between semesters, we temporarily lived with my stepmom, who at the time was my dad's fiance, and now it's my stepmom, who lived at the time in East Tennessee. So I've told my livelihood in 6 states, and now I'm back to state number 2, which was Texas, that I decided I'd make home after completing my 8 years of college. So my accent is a concoction that's a mix of all of the southern states of the U.S.
Oh, well, I haven't spent any time in the South at all. Nothing. Maybe a week at the most.
So that makes me wonder, where are you from, Tim?
I'm from Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been here my whole life. I was born in New York, but that was just, when I was really young. But I haven't spent any time, and I look forward to spending time in the South. Sometime I don't have any relatives down there. So in my family, if you're invited by a relative, you stay at their house, and but I don't have anybody in the South. Paducah, Kentucky. I guess maybe that's the South. Maybe.
Well, it
relative.
depends how you define the South. Below the Manson-Dixon line, yes. Madison-Dixon, or is it Mason-Dixon line? You remember what they used to draw the line in the times of the Civil War?
Yeah.
So
I've
Kentucky
heard
did
of
have
it.
slaves back in the time of the Civil War. So in that sense, if you look at that time in history, what was the North versus the South? It was on the southern line, southern side. So you may consider it the South, but other people argue that modern day has new definition of where the line should be.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. I've spent my whole life in Wisconsin. I moved in Wisconsin. I moved in this state. I've moved from one part of Wisconsin to another part. And I went to school in Minnesota for 1 year. So I guess that makes the only state that I've lived in outside of Wisconsin is Minnesota.
So what would you say to these listeners? So here you heard my Southern charm and my Southern share about compassion, where we're trying to teach others, our listeners, to show love and compassion to one another, to the world around them, and so forth. What would you share based on the topic of this show, this episode?
Well, I would say this. I think that compassion has a lot to do with who you see your social group. So as there's a lot of people that don't consider anybody in their social group to have any, let's say, color in their skin. But I would say compassion has to do with understanding that people in a country, and like maybe in this, so a lot of people in Wisconsin, there are no black people. Okay, a lot of parts of Wisconsin, so they're not compassionate. Yet I wouldn't prejudge them, but I would say they don't have the experience of other cultures. They only have one culture. So,
And that's
I would be
interesting because on the
Yeah.
other hand, Houston, which is the general metro area I'm from in Texas,
Is the number one most diverse metro area in the US. Our minority are white people. Our majority are a split of Black, Asian American, African American, Asian American, and Latinos, like various Hispanic groups. Like we're predominantly, by the majority of our population, falls into some kind of minority group. We do not have very many whites. Houston as a whole, like when you look at the various suburb areas and the parts that are actual Houston as opposed to its suburb areas, is predominantly middle class or upper middle class. And in certain areas, it's first class, like where somebody would have a house that costs $25 million, while you drive an hour away and you can get a house for $100,000. That's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and for $100,000. So we have a wide range of different groups, like as far as like you're talking about ethnic and racial groups, but we're also, for the most part, even though not 100%, somewhere along the lines of middle class, upper middle class or lower middle class or whatever, but still in that general scope. Even though we do have certain areas that are what we consider first class. In other areas, they're considered impoverished.
I've heard that there's a lot of freedom in Texas. I've heard that somebody told me that they moved down there.
There is, like,
and-
we don't.
Yeah.
Like
Go
we
ahead.
can carry weapons around Texas. We can carry weapons on us in Texas. So we have a lot of freedom that other states don't. I mean, they're along the political lines, and where somebody lies on the topic is a matter of where they stand in the political realm. But yeah, we do have a lot of things that allow us freedom that other states don't allow, such as my example of being able to carry guns or other kinds of weapon on us to the work, to a job, to school, wherever. So that's just one example that, yeah, we do in Texas have a lot more freedoms than other states in the US in general.
So that's unique to Texas.
Well, other states may be following behind us, but it's been for years that Texas was always a Republican state. When you come to like voting for presidents, we're always a Republican state, but people in the metro area are predominantly Democrats. But it's because of how large the state is, so how much country scene that is a larger percentage of the population of the state as a whole that are predominantly Republicans. And that's why we're always, as far as our governor, is always a Republican. Whoever's a running Republican is who wins governor placement as far as the vote. And that's why also we're not considered a swing state in terms of the run for a presidency. You know what I'm talking about? When we're watching for a vote and we're trying to see what's the results. Texas isn't a swing state. It's always Republican. And so certain things that we have are because it's where the Republican things have always, whatever was the laws they favored, the laws or lack of laws that they favored, always won through my entire life. And even in my parents' life, it's always been the Republican side wins the battle in the state of Texas. And so whatever is a Republican topic, whatever is a political topic, the Republican side always wins in Texas.
Well, that's just not fair.
No, it's not. It's not, because that means that the Democrats pretty much are always outweighed. But that's the makeup of like where lower, more rural areas generally are predominantly Republican and more urban areas is generally predominantly Democrats. But Texas is such a huge state that there's a lot more rural areas than there are urban areas like Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston.
Why do you suppose that rural areas prefer Republican candidates?
Well, I'm not sure necessarily we need to be talking about political topics with the fact that that's not the gist of this show.
Okay. Oh, that's fair. I mean, I follow politics a lot.
Well,
So,
I'm sure a lot of people in America do, but at the same time, this is about showing your compassion to one
okay.
another. That's what compassionate citizens about.
Oh,
And I'm showing my
okay.
Passion by not wanting to lay my political agenda on anybody. And neither should anybody else lay their political agenda on any of our listeners. That's my way of
No.
showing compassion.
Oh, that sounds great. I think we have that going for us in America, is that we seem to respect each other's political. I would say the opposite, because I like to contradict. I would say the compassion is that you discuss these things in the open, in the free, fresh air that we provide in America, and political discussions. And here, yeah, I agree with what we're doing right here, what we should be talking about. But
Right, and
it
showing
seems,
compassion is not a matter of laying your agenda on somebody else. That is not showing compassion. That's putting forth force and lacking of compassion, which is that everybody can be free to have their own agenda and not have to put up with the pressure of somebody else's agenda being laid on them and or forced on them.
So I disagree. That's saying that these people should not be compassionate and that they should be able to lay their agenda and talk freely about politics. It means they shouldn't be compassionate, but instead they should be able to try to convince and force other people to be on their saying. And that is not compassion at all.
so we're speaking way, like, we went from moderately agreeing with each other to totally misunderstanding and disagreeing with each other, and not in a bad way, but totally misunderstanding the other's viewpoint. And I'm not saying that it's, I think there is a value in conversation that we're saying we like the freedom, but we're not sure exactly how do we get to the freedom. How do we, like, how is it that how do we share it? How do we care it? Like, how do we
Okay.
express it? Like,
So talking about your whatever is your side on any political topic or other debatable topic like religion, etc., right?
yeah.
Showing a compassion is both being able to vocalize their side and finding a happy medium. That's another approach to compassion.
Because one of the biggest causes in workforce, like in the workforce or on the streets of murder and or suicide and so forth, are disagreements somewhere along the lines of political topics, which is why politics is one of the things, in addition to religion, is one of the things that is to be kept out of the workforce. Whatever is your employer, your profession, whatever, you don't talk about that on the job or with anybody that you work with, even if it's a Friday night party with your coworkers. And that's because it's so debatable.
So being compassionate is the ideal world, being able to both share your side, but to be able to make the reality the happy median that's in between your two sides. As we say, it's not necessarily a black and white picture, but trying to find the median gray. So you have to sacrifice so much of what you want to not happen for the good of so much of what the other side wants
To happen. But at the same time, the other side has to sacrifice so much of what they want so that certain of what you want can happen. That's finding compassion in politics. Find that happy median where each something that each want happens, but it's actually in between, and it does not cause a division within our country and or states or other communities.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I welcome, and I welcome. I like to know what other people are thinking. I invite them into my, and that's me personally, but I do understand what you're saying, that not every place is a place to have these discussions.
Right,
so,
and that's why I'm talking
yeah.
about compassion being one way of showing respect for one another, that there are certain things that tend to escalate wars and or fights, and we don't want to cost lives by trying to lay down our grounds on somebody else and trying to force them to believe whatever is our side of a debatable topic, whether it's religion or politics or anything else that's debatable. That part of compassion is showing love, and part of love is also not wanting to onset war or battles of any sort. Shootings, like these massive shootings and stuff we deal with, that have got worse over the last year, 2 years, even since the pandemic started. And they've been onset by various degrees of suffering and or anger and so forth. So they've had to do with disagreements in some form or another, whether it was disagreement with the political topic of something that did or didn't happen in the White House, or it was a disagreement of somebody served them the wrong burger, so somebody who was crazy broke out a gun and shot the server in because of a burger being served wrong. But they were various degrees of anger and or disagreement, even over the smallest thing of like the example with the burger being served wrong.
But still, that's part of our problem right now in our country, is that people are not showing compassion. They're instead showing various degrees of rage that has worsened over the years since the pandemic started, 2021, 2020. And it's even on our local news of people making it aware that 2019 was worse than 2018, but then here 2020 was worse than all the years before. And then 2021 has already been worse than 2020. So we're on an incline of increase in murders, suicide, burglary, a lot of other crimes. And some of these are robbing people of their compassion because they're being abused. So now they're scared of other people, and instead of being able to show love to others or compassion to others, they're instead fearful of who will be the next person to do something to them.
I guess we should make some definitions, like what is compassion? Maybe what can we do?
That's where we started, because I said that compassion
Yeah.
I define as love, and being compassionate I find is something that we are able to do through, in my personal opinion, seeking guidance of religion. Because like the Bible, as I'm a Christian, talks about God's love, Jesus's love, the right way being showing love to our brothers and sisters, and helping one another, helping your neighbors, so forth. So however we find that compassion, which I say is a metaphor of love, that however we find it, that's what we need to put out there, because this show is about compassion, showing compassion towards one another, and listeners want to hear guidance on that, and that's why they listen to this show.
Yeah. I guess it's pretty clear cut. How do we find that? How do we do that? I mean, what are the ways? I guess this is for a host to maybe help us focus with.
Well, I'm a co-host, and that's why I'm trying to help you focus. That's why I'm trying to help you focus on what this is about.
Yeah, you're doing great. What are like? Yeah, you're doing great. What are the ways, like, like, how do we know if somebody's compassionate? Like, who in our circle that we communicate every day, who can we consider to be compassionate? Like who do we think is on our side or compassionate to us? And we're compassionate and reciprocal compassionate to them.
Okay, so you're saying is that you don't have to be compassionate to somebody else unless they're compassionate to you. That's what I just heard. And what this show is about is how we can show compassion to other people, not how we can get compassion from other people. We give. Compassion is giving. Compassion is love. Compassion is the desire to help and go out of your way for another person. So it's not, what I heard from you is we find a friend that's compassionate with us and then we give it back. But that's not true compassion. True compassion, you're giving it to somebody whether they return it or not. You give it to somebody taking the first move and not waiting on and the contingency of how they deliver to you, and or if they deliver at all versus having nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I guess that's what I said. I mean, I can't take it back. It is, so we're really trying to define we're not defining who's our friend and who's not so much as we are trying to live in a compassionate way.
That's exactly what she announced at the beginning that this show's about, is how to help one another live compassionately and show compassion to one another. That's what Kurt started with. That's the introduction of what the show's about.
Okay. What are like activities that we do? Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just an attitude. What you're saying, what I'm hearing is that it's an attitude of compassion, like your tone of voice. Maybe you open the door for somebody.
Right, which is actions and not tone of voice. But that's exactly what we're talking about. How can we be compassionate towards others? So one thing, open the door for one another. Especially some of the things that are old gentleman behavior that seem to be fading with time, that a lot of women still value, like the man holding the door open. That'd be showing compassion, whether it's woman to woman, man to man, man to woman, whatever. So holding the door open, that's one way. What else you have?
Let's say complimenting somebody. Hey, that looks nice on you. Making a comment about somebody to their, telling them something that you noticed about them. That's, a non-critical thing, but you're saying, oh, I noticed this. Would you like to share?
Be non-critical. That sounds to me that you're saying it's only when it's a true, honest compliment that it's compassion, which I would agree with.
Yeah. And maybe I go so far as to say it's compassion when you step into a situation you might not feel comfortable with, but you think, this is totally wrong. I trust my own judgment. I see a situation and I go, I need to step into this. I need to kind of voice my opinion, step out of my circle of comfort, my comfort circle, and say, what you're doing is really not, it's not Christian. Or, okay, maybe sometimes I go that far. And actually I see maybe something happening and people just turning away and going, well, I'm not going to get involved in that. Whereas I think the action of getting involved, of course, we can't get involved in everybody's business. That's for sure.
True. And that's where sometimes what you said could have been actually crossing the line in terms of, which is based on what's the exact situation and where is it taking place, like on the job versus in your personal life, etc. But that's where sometimes what you just shared is how you ignite conflict. You ignite a conflict.
But other times it is how you make a correction. And that also has to do with your deliverance of the, hey, something's not right. We need to fix this and this, or there's a way to a better way to do whatever, X, Y, and Z. Because it's even a matter of how do we deliver that correction per se, the acknowledgement that something's not right. Because sometimes people are trying to acknowledge that, but they do it with aggression, and that's what gets the guns pulled out. Other times, people do it with love, and somebody ends up apologizing, saying, "You know what? You're right. I shouldn't have X, Y, and Z. I should have A, B, and C." So our attitude is a way to do it, even with what you're talking about. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do. And yeah, it's, yeah, I'm agreed. Agreed.
So then
Um,
we're agreeing that our tone of voice is one way to control and or determine how compassionate we're being, not just the message we're delivering and not just the circumstances that we deliver it in.
yes, because if you choose to voice your opinion, there's a way to do it. That's non-threatening. And it's more well received. So that, like you say,
Mhm.
they don't like your tone of voice, so the first thing they do is reach for their gun. So,
Right.
but maybe you can do it in a way where they're not, you can show your displeasure or something, or your understanding of something you just saw them do, and you can express yourself without, in a non-threatening way, like,
Which I think when you said like the example with the gun, that has to do with the circumstance I pointed out of making a judgment call based on what circumstance. Because if somebody already has the gun out, you know, sometimes it's just simply we need to call 911 and we don't need to approach them ourselves. You see what I mean? Versus
Ye-
if they don't have the gun out, but we hear them being aggressive, maybe we need to, instead of being vocal about where they're wrong, that we get them more aggressive, more upset, and or the gun out, to instead of saying, you know, well, hey, you were wrong about this, or that you were dishonest with this, or whatever is the confronting, is you basically were talking about being able to draw the line, is that sometimes instead we need to say, hey, what's really going on? Because I know you're really upset. Is there something I can do to help you? And in that case, when the disagreement is because somebody is, whether it's mentally off balance or it's just they're simply angry and angry at the world, that we need to calm them down, or the rest of us somewhere around them in the restaurant or wherever will be in some kind of threat, some kind of danger. If they're already upset, especially when they have a gun or whatever else, and or we know that they are on the verge of starting to scream at other people, how do you know they're not going to have a gun in their pocket?
yeah. I think there's a lots of situations you can get involved in that aren't like toxic, situations. And
Right. So part of it is that we
there-
need to determine if it's toxic. And that help us to determine how we either confront or comfort the person based on the level of toxicity.
like most of us would stay away from a family situation. We're like, well, that's their private family. And I do understand that. That's the way their family is. And you don't want to separate the mother and the father and take them to the side, because they have their own understanding. So you try to stay out of that, is what I'm thinking.
Well, and that depends. What if it's an abusive mother or father? Then you really need to get involved. So that's why it's a matter of determining the circumstance. You see what I mean? Because if it's a mother and father, yeah, maybe you could say we need to stay out. But if we see that
mother and father at a football game or wherever else where there's other people present to see that the way that mother and father are delivering and approaching the kid is not right, then sometimes it's not a matter of confronting the parents, but making the authority aware, and that's for the good of the child. You see what I mean? So it's not always a matter of confronting, but still that we could see that there are times we need to get involved. You get my example?
So from person to person, we may have different views on this subject. It's interesting.
Well, I mean,
Like,
I'm talking about the reality, the legal realm is that if somebody's abusing their children and we witness it, if we do not come forward with the fact that we know that it's going on, we could be considered part of the criminal team because we knew about it but didn't make whoever aware. So like if you see somebody abusing a child and you don't tell authorities, you may think, oh, well, that's not my business. But technically the way our laws work in the country is that then you could be considered part of the defendant's case because it'd be like, if you weren't part of it, why didn't you tell anybody about it? Why didn't you go to the police? You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not aware of how the laws work. It could
Well, that
be
is one case. That's one example. If you are aware of the laws being broken
And you do not report it, you're considered part of the case in terms of being involved and not just simply witnessing and being aware of. That's why it's so important that when we see something going wrong, we report it to police. Otherwise, we're risking that we ourselves will be part of the defendant's team because of knowing about it but not reporting it. So the police will speculate that we're partially involved and that we knew about it and so forth, and we'll end up on the defendant's side of the case. That's how the laws work in the US. That's a national law right there.
Without getting into the law, I'm just thinking about the wisdom of getting involved. And personally, if I did see abuse and did suspect abuse and was pretty clear about it in my head, I would get involved. But
Well,
yeah,
that's
that
what
is
I'm
my,
saying. If we witness it, witness means to watch it happen, not hearsay where you just hear it, but you don't know how legit it is.
Witness means you actually see it with your own eyes.
yeah. If I did, yeah, I would definitely get involved if I see it with my own eyes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's what witnessing means, and that's why I was saying that versus what you're talking about is more hearsay of you hear about it, but you don't know how true it is. So you wouldn't necessarily get involved because you don't know if it's just somebody making up something or if there's actually some legitimacy to it. Versus what I was saying, witnessing, the literal meaning of witnessing is to watch it happen.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable in that environment. If I suspect it or if I see it, I know what my own beliefs are. I know in general society what we accept and what we don't accept. And there are things we accept of other people disciplining their kids. There are acceptable practices that are, some people believe in spanking. Well, I guess there is a way that it becomes an abuse, and yet there are some parents that probably do it in an understandable way, and then somebody has to
Right,
make
but
a
a
determination.
spanking is defined when you hit them on the butt versus abuse is when you hit them in any other part of the body.
So that still is where you could tell if it's abuse versus discipline, even if you were against spanking, but you could tell but what you see to know if that's what you saw or not.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so let's change this. So one is discipline. One is the one way to show compassion is making appropriate people or authority aware when you see something going wrong and or somebody being mistreated.
What else do you have as examples of how we, all of us here and our listeners, can show more compassion to one another and or society as a whole?
That's a good part. I wonder if there's anything else, because it seems like we're not talking about compassion a lot in our daily lives. Maybe we're talking about it when we go to church. But it seems like it's not a big subject for most people.
It's not, and
And,
that's part of the goal of this
definitely.
program is that we're trying to bring compassion into the community and the awareness. That totally right there hits the nail on the head about what this compassion show is all about. We're trying to help bring it into the community, help people find ways to bring it into their local community. Even if it starts with just being within their family, then their social circle and so forth, to grow out, to expand to the whatever is their local area that they can reach. And or the use of technology where we could reach the whole world. It depends on who all attends a Zoom meeting or whatever, right? So like
Oh,
think,
yeah.
what if you were one of the listeners made a YouTube channel and on there you made a video about compassion and how they could, what is their perspective of compassion and ways to express it. So that's another way we could be compassionate towards one another, is by spreading wisdom of ways that each of us know how to be compassionate and somehow learn from one another.
I think we spend so much time trying to divide people, and we don't spend enough time trying to bring them together, which is, to me, is
Exactly.
compassion. Yeah. And so,
Right,
so
bringing
that
them
balance,
together is compassion.
yeah, the balance is, we're off balance. I'm gonna go to work. Bro, hold on a second.
You have any thoughts, Kurt? You have Kurt back.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, well, this has been going as a great conversation. I think it's all on track to, kind of what the purpose here is of unpacking compassion and setting examples and, discussing application of, how we build out compassion and share it and grow it. I think of it like the Happy Neighborhood Project. Edwin Edinburgh set
Right.
out to spread happiness around the world. So I think with the Compassionate Citizens Project and this podcast and what everybody's doing on this topic around the world, that it's a great endeavor to spread compassion around the world and keep all these niceties going. And, the world can be tough on people in many ways. Earlier today, we were with VetNet out of Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I was announcing our plans for 222 to save 22, which is based off of the old statistic of 22 veterans a day losing their life to suicide. And so we know that the number is a lot higher today. Some might accept the statistic of 27 veterans a day really losing their life to suicide. So the numbers are going the wrong way. So
They are, and that was
today,
one thing you may have heard us. I don't know if you were here yet, Kurt, but did you hear us talking about crime in general going the wrong way?
yeah, it sounded like you were talking about possession of firearms and, use of guns and stuff like that. And,
Yeah,
shooting.
but we even talked about crime in general, like rape and other things. It's just crime in general is going the wrong way in our country, and that being part of the way of where I was talking to Tim about how one thing we need to do to try to reverse it is showing love and compassion to one another and or seeking help for those who need it, which Emily could confess. I think she's been here the whole time, even though she's been hiding. So she could tell you exactly what we talked about. But that's where we were going, myself and Tim, about the different ways we could show the compassion because of problems like that are issues in society as a whole and not only a certain sector, but there's signs of the lack of compassion and the need for it.
Yeah, that's right. So I look at it as, making this conversation, this dialogue available and to, build out this aspect, of our lives and being confident that it is necessary. I mean, it may be a little tiring, it may be wearing to think that everybody needs us to be talking about compassion or doing this all the time, but it is something that the more pervasive we are, the more it's going to make a difference. The more it's an all the time thing, a household aspect, the more success we're going to have, that it's actually going to make a difference, lowering the statistics, lowering crime, increasing sportsmanship in high school, varsity football, or any sport, collegiate sports, pro sports, whatever it is, that everything that we're experiencing in life can be at a levity of improved humanity and greater respect for each other and of greater consideration. And, looking at this idea that if somebody is not behaving or doing what you think they ought to be doing, it can be about considering their life experiences, to say that other people have different experiences in life than we do. And it's these different life stories that create different manifestations of behavior and how people express their emotions and the choices that they make. So,
Right. And actually, Tim and I were talking about also channels of getting our own ways and or methods of compassion out there. Like my example of making a YouTube channel and telling people one way I know, whoever is the person talking, to show compassion or love to one another is XYZ. You may say ABC, I say XYZ. And then if all of our listeners are getting out whatever is their way, even if they post it on Facebook or however they get it out to the world, but spreading the words and wisdoms of compassion. What are your methods? And each listener spreading their method. And that as a team, outside of just Compassionate Citizen, but it and all its listeners as a whole, spreading various methods to one another, not just doing them, but even advising other people via different avenues of ways. And you may say a different way than I do. And so if all four of us in this room are spreading it of our methods, then there'll be people receiving 16 methods.
that's right. And I think having group experiences is powerful. An example that I always lean on is the powerful success story that I've had in water skiing. I always tell people about 8 years ago, we were doing adaptive water skiing, and it was a great thing that, a handful of programs were doing water skiing with people with disabilities. But then
Right.
when I made it more of a campaign to make it pervasive across all of the Wisconsin Water Ski Federation, we more than sextupled the access for people with disabilities in 6 years. And it was done through an education. It was done through an awareness. It was done through a narrative to say, this is something that's going on a little bit, and there's an idea we could be doing more, and to just ask people if they share this appetite to grow this part of life. And in that case, it was water skiing. And I feel we can apply it here to compassion. If people share our passion for sharing compassion, we
Amen.
can now talk to the skills that are effective in our talking about compassion and how we can witness it being lived out in the choices and actions and reactions that people take. Like, let's take road rage. Road rage is a huge thing, across the nation. And I'm sure other parts of the world, but I more hear about it in the USA.
Right.
Compassion could kind of help gear people up, that if somebody's doing something undesirable in traffic, to have compassion. Like, we don't know what that person's dealing with, and we don't know what's ailing them for why they do such a thing, like dart out in front of you and make dangerous maneuvers, or to make
True.
impeding maneuvers, and like making us do things in our driving experience that we think that they offended us in what they're doing. And even people being vulgar, like people
Right.
showing their middle finger and so forth at each
That's
other.
exactly where I was going to go, is that we may not be able to help or control how that other person cut us off, but we can help or control how we react to it, which is, do we react with shooting the finger, or do we react with cussing them out, putting our window down, or etc., versus just let them go, let them get ahead of you, and you as the person receiving it stay calm so you don't feed the fire per se.
Where'd he go?
He is everybody but me.
Uh,
Definitely,
But
we've
yeah.
had
Quite a conversation about compassion and different avenues of showing it.
yes, we have.
Yeah, I think I was on mute, so I get to repeat. I think this is a great example of people getting together right now, talking about something and making a practice of it, and getting better at the practice of talking about compassion, because how many discussions do we have about compassion in our daily life? I think
Not
the
enough.
subject, people driving and people with guns, and those are like outward expressions of the wrong kind of compassion. But there are so many other things that the subject, we're gonna find express
Are
to
we
help
losing?
our daily lives, the people that are, yeah, help us.
Well, all right. Well, I think we are at a good point to come to our culmination of this episode. I think it's been a fantastic conversation. Every show is unique and, new nuggets of insight and information. So I think it's wonderful what the four of us have put together today. So, Emily, do you want to get us started out? We're going to take a few minutes to wrap up. What are your thoughts in conclusion and culminating this show? What are you thinking?
I thought it was a great conversation about all about compassion. But wanted to thank Jennifer and Tim for being our guest today, along with anybody who has tuned in to listen. And over to you, Carrie.
All right. So, Jennifer, what about with your work today as our co-host? Thank you very much for having this as one of the World of Ability podcast shows that you're willing to co-host. But what are your thoughts, Jennifer, of what your takeaways are from today's conversation?
I think we were definitely able to get a start, first step on my mission as a co-host and compassionate citizen, which is helping the world learn and practice more ways and different ways of showing compassion to one another. I think definitely our conversation between myself and Tim predominantly, but you and Emily being in and out, that we were able to come up with various answers that are ways that each listener and or each other can show more compassion to the world around us, whether it's ourselves or it's our family, our social world, or whoever else it is the world around us. I think we did definitely put a first step in to finding more ways. And in this case, Tim and I created the different ideas. And hopefully with whoever is our next guest, when I'm on here again, that we can create additional ideas of ways that our listeners can be compassionate towards one another and or possibly the public, like my idea of making YouTube videos about what they learn or ideas they get from listening to listeners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just kind of perusing my calendar here with Prosperity Pathways podcast that we produce every Wednesday. Jennifer, you have indicated a few of these Prosperity Pathways podcasts that you're going to be coming on and joining us in producing those shows, just like we did today here at Compassionate Citizens. And I have it down for Wednesday, November 17th at that 2:57 Central starting time. And same thing for Wednesday, December 1st and Wednesday, December 15th. Those are the ones we have scheduled so far. And Jennifer, you have alluded to the fact that you are looking forward to schedule some 2022 podcasting that you'll come on as our featured guest co-host. So exciting stuff. And thank you, Jennifer, for being generous to provide like this. And we want to thank our friend Tim Tarosian. Thank you for setting aside your time. I know you're going to be heading off to work, if you haven't already, sometime soon here, working your second shifts. So happy to have you have the Compassionate Citizens podcast as the last thing of your afternoon before you have to think about your evening of other work. So again, I'm yours truly, Kurt Roskoff. Please be a part of this co-hosting team and all of the other work we do as well, being a part of the Onward and Upward team, Onward and Upward being a nonprofit responding to people experiencing homelessness. I invite everybody to check out Transform U. That's the letter U, transformu.us, transformubroadcast.com, and let's start over. I got this broadcasting thoughts going on here, but let's start with the brand Transform U Podcasts, plural with an S at the end, transformupodcast.com. So a few websites there to give you the full background on how this is possible and how it's powered by Transform U Media Network. Again, the collaborative efforts and work product that we've been doing all year long, 2021, emerges the World of Ability Podcast Network. Thank you very much for all of your shares of all of our podcasting videos and commenting and reacting, liking our videos and just being a part of this. If you'd like to be a guest or have any other business regarding these podcasts, feel free to give me a call, 262-372-1SKI. That's 262-372-1754. And I welcome texts on that line. And also give me an email, Kurt, K-U-R-T, at, okay, I'm getting a little note here from our podcast engineer. So again, let's finish that email address, Kurt, at thedisabilitychannel.us. And I'm seeing here that with Transform U Broadcasts, if you put a /WOA for World of Ability, you can see the World of Ability Podcast Network, transformubroadcast.com/WOA. So we'll let that be the culmination of today's show. Well done. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. See you.